although we wait, I wanted to do this about 2 hours ago. So I think maybe I'll repeat this for people who show up later, but we're gonna basically continue the really awesome discussion that the guys had regarding IM 1776 episode 1. Now I want to clarify that we are not discussing the episode. We are not discussing the issue. If you read it and you want to bring it up and you want to talk about something in there, awesome, do so. But the space yesterday had a really good conversation about art. One of my favorite conversations really ever about what art. I don't even really want to call it right-wing art. Just mainstream art really that could appeal to us. And the type of stuff, I think, no one said this explicitly. Ancient, when you come in later, I want to hear your thoughts on this. But what I think is that we talked about mainstream art that would appeal to us, that we need to emulate. Particularly, we talked about David Lynch. We talked about a lot of stuff, but we talked about David Lynch and Werner Herzog, and I mentioned Harmony Korine. And we weren't saying that these are guys that are right-wing, although we did say their art could appeal to us on the right. And I think the implicit suggestion was that we need to emulate their technique and their messaging, not the message that they deliver, but the way they deliver their message. And I really wanted to hear Gio's thoughts on just the art right in general, what he thinks the state of it. So, Gio, you know what? We're going to make this an interview. That wasn't my intention, but that's what we're going to do.
All right. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. We're good to go. We're going to start. I was going to wait for more people to show up, but I started rambling, and I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, and if for those of you who, like, eventually this will be on YouTube, so don't worry about it, and Astral's Substack. But I shared, like, can you just, like, really briefly before I forget, like, can you, like, run by how Harmony Korine fits into this? I showed her the thing how you could put him in, like, a right-wing context.
Who?
Harmony Korine.
Oh, I mean, dude, if I answer that question, we're gonna just have a conversation about Harmony Korine. Why don't we loop back to that, because it will.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, because
I'm not saying he's right-wing at all. But I am saying that he's. Well, to put it as simply as possible without getting bogged down in my entire perspective on him, the thing about him is that he was given a lot of mainstream attention and money and fame, if you could call it.
Oh, yeah, he was everywhere back in the day.
He was everywhere back in the day. And what he did with it was authentic and idiosyncratic. And he didn't sell out. He made art on his own terms, and some of it is hard to look at and hard to watch and just not good. But I think he did it on purpose in an attempt to send a message to the viewers of art, to the subject. I think he was addressing the subject. And, you know, I hated him for a long time. I really liked Kids, and I really liked Gummo. And then he made a bunch of shit that was just not even, like, watchable. I don't even know the names of half that he was producing for a while. And then I feel like he came out with Spring Breakers, and I, like, figured out that he actually was a really good artist, and he was trying to do something specific. And I felt like I understood him.
Yeah.
And I respect him now, but I think if we want to create art, because, see, I made a tweet about, like, what I think the subject matter right-wing writers should deal with and how they should present it. But it was just one tweet. It wasn't a tweet thread. So obviously I couldn't encapsulate the entirety of what I thought, like, the next great American novel should be in one little tweet. But a lot of people were criticizing me because they thought my idea was like basically a Hallmark card. Like I was suggesting people write a Hallmark card. But of course, I don't think that people should do that. My suggestion was that people should write a novel. Someone should write a novel about a young man in today's world in which like he's subjected to all the things that we talk about, that we denounce on Twitter. He's subjected to a friend who trans from male to female. He's offered drugs. He's around lots of people casually doing drugs. He's around lots of people casually having sex. And he turns these things down in an attempt to, start a traditional family. And I guess it sounds corny, but, I didn't envision it as like this Puritan going through like turning everything down. I was thinking of it more like a Clockwork Orange, where he actually does indulge in it. Because if you read Welbeck, like that was the whole point of my tweet. I had Welbeck in mind in particular. If you read him, you have like a guy in Serotonin. You have a guy who indulges in all that stuff throughout his entire life, and he never wants to stop. And then you find him in his 40s or 50s, and he's got nothing, and he's got no one, and he's totally alone, and he's like, he starts taking medicine, antidepressants that just make things worse for him. And basically, I was envisioning someone writing that novel, except instead of him just like continuing down the dark path until he's all alone, he gets his shit together and makes the right choices and lives happily ever after, quote unquote, which is what happens in the book version of A Clockwork Orange.
The one that they messed with for American audiences.
Yeah, well, and the movie has a different ending, and it's a more nihilistic ending. And all I'm saying about Harmony Korine is that like his aesthetic, he's extreme, but he's doing it in a like a way to like convention. So I was envisioning this novel being like in an unconventional sort of in your face Clockwork Orange / Harmony Korine, like almost satirical, but at the end of the day, there is a right-wing message embedded in there, and I got like attacked like pretty heavily. I mean, nothing compared.
Yeah, I saw, but
yeah. So I mean, I told you I was going to be long-winded if I answered your question. So go ahead, man. We're here.
By the way, I see
Adam
Adam requested, and I think maybe we'll go for a little bit, then we'll get other people in. I know someone left, but there's like good people that I think could all speak like ancient philosophy. Of course, Lampus Lima, my good friend, Sam Buns. We'll see. Okay, yeah, but maybe let's.
No, I really want to hear from you. Like this space exists right now because I wanted to hear what you had to say yesterday, and it just never.
Oh yeah, okay.
So all of it, man. Just give us all of it.
First of all, I was pissed because nobody mentioned me, even though I mentioned a total of 5 different times. I'm kidding. I'm partially kidding. Every joke admission of ego is a true admission of ego, I think. But no, nobody mentioned me. They mentioned Owen Cyclops, but not me. I can't believe this. No, I'm kidding. I think that as much as I appreciate, I forget his name. He follows me. The PhD student that organized the space. I feel like I have 2 big concerns right off the bat. And this has nothing to go with Mark or anyone else, because I'm very good friends with people that I'm basically like, one of their top soldiers. I am 1776. And I feel bad that I haven't completed this very long form thing I have on Russia, which I'm kind of like scared to finish because of, well, we'll see what happens. But I have to write a second article for them sometime soon. But anyway, so this isn't a criticism towards them, but the 2 things that I have in terms of my concern is sort of, unfortunately, I think in some ways was vindicated in that space. One is this sort of instrumentalization of artwork, and to talk about the need for right-wing art in some ways, or to talk about the need of the right to approach art, is very concerning in the sense that it can become, I don't want it subject to the typical forces that usually conservatives have when it comes to major issues, which is to talk about it, to sort of find a way to grasp at it, to instrumentalize it, and to basically talk it to a slow and graceless halt for people to say, well, that issue's played out. And one tweet I remember when this came about during the initial release of the volume, which Mark has graciously given me a copy of, is, why do we need right-wing art? We have anime. That's like one response that I received, which, I mean, it's a joke, but I mean, I guess it goes to the question of, are there resources already existing? And the second major concern I feel, I hate to like chide anyone, but the second major concern I have is of like actual like literary people in like departments interloping and not understanding like the specific critiques that certain writers in issue.
Dude, I'm not going to interrupt you again, but we need to
go ahead, no problem.
But we need to gatekeep that. Like, we really do. And that is not a personal comment whatsoever on those guys. Those guys were awesome. But like, it needs to be gate kept. And Ancient, please, I hope you're taking notes, because you're gonna comment on this later. Go on, I won't interrupt again.
Yeah, so about the gatekeeping, I feel that like the big issue. Okay, let me just like one super specific example. Now, if you read the Daniel Miller, Daniel Miller is a good friend of mine, and well, not good friend. I have never like met him in real life, but I like to consider him friendly, right? Like he's a big inspiration on me and what he's done for a long time now. And the thing is, when you read that article, he's specifically addressing a very destructive element of the E-right. He's specifically talking about like very nihilistic Wignats and people of that nature, people that are in like Discord and Gab ghettos, who are like basically edge posting into oblivion. And he's addressing those people specifically. And that's what he means about repeating certain nihilistic tendencies on the political left. But when sort of an interloper, and I know that's a harsh word, comes into the scene, quote unquote, or what I mean, the scene is such a Plato term. I rather enjoy Thomas's term for it, this thing of ours. I think they're not going to get it, because you have to have a grounding in the sort of relations that have formulated discourse around posting and around aesthetics and so forth. Like, to say, like, for someone to come in to say that, well, when Default Friend writes about posters, how that's irrelevant compared to like X, Y, and Z professional people. I mean, you have to realize like this is the waters that we swim in. That is like posters form the backbone of the E-right in a lot of ways. And so that's the problem. That's why there needs to be rigorous gatekeeping. There needs to be a sort of eclecticism. I'm recently watching this documentary on what's his name, on the American artist Carroll. I can't believe I forget his first name. Cornell. He does the memory boxes, and Cornell, he was like very much like an eccentric autiste reclusive that was really given space to do what he wanted, and he resonates, I think, with the spirit of like what a lot of people are doing, and especially with relation to memory and time. And I think like that's really what we need in terms of building institutions that can give posters spaces to become actual artists. And I think that you can't really do it by having like, in some ways you do need semi-professional people to come in who have been disenchanted by the institutions. But at the same time, there's a danger in that, because clearly you have people, and this has been demonstrated, that don't understand the sort of context from which they're operating in. And I know it's like kind of like cringy or whatever to talk about gatekeeping, but in a sense, I mean, every effective thing by its very nature is subject to the forces of building a fence around what it is, and that fence being porous, but not gatekeeping in the sense of like, oh, this committee says that you're out of the picture.
Yeah, let me ask you a quick question.
More of like creating the environment itself that allows for certain modes of artistic or discursive expression to flourish, rather than like, but then the problem is that with what comes about it is an active force of gatekeeping, right? I mean, Chan culture was amazing for this. I mean, what do you think? I know it's like kind of
but what did they produce,
example, though? But like, the pee pee poo poo thing. Sorry, Astral, I cut you off. What did you say? Uh,
You said Chan. Well, finish your thought. Finish your
no,
thought.
I was going to say like a ridiculous example would be the pee pee poo poo thing. But what I mean by gatekeeping, I mean sort of being consciously aware of the fact that in the attempt to create anything meaningful, there's always going to be interlopers. There's always going to be ankle biters. There's always going to be the enemy looking from the outside. And I feel like this time that this sort of mode of discourse that we're engaging in, it's very unique in that we're actually consciously thinking of, okay, what are we doing now? What's our next step? And what can we create that is meaningful rather than a lot of the meme magic and the happenstance and the sort of going with the flow that these spaces have been doing for the better part of, I would say, maybe 10 years or so. I mean, at least since Trump. But I think the problem is those waves can only carry us for so long and that there needs to be a conscious effort. But the problem is when you start to approach a conscious effort of creation as a group or as a loosely affiliated conglomerate, there's always these dangers of it being shifted and slotted into certain things. And the space in general, I think, didn't give me a lot of confidence, put it that way. Not to like criticize anyone too harshly, but these are just my concerns. And I mean, hey, it would be great. Like, I mean, if I did get accepted into a PhD program, maybe it'd be different. But like, you know, I didn't, so I'm here now. So there you go.
Well, look, I agree with you. Let me throw out a couple questions I want you to answer. The first is, you mentioned Chan culture and Chan memes, and we've talked about this. You talk about this a lot in other places. Producing memes, producing ideas, inspiring people to go on to make something, either a novel or a poem or whatever it may be, a YouTube channel or art in some other way. So the first question I have for you is, a lot of this internet stuff is ephemeral, which is funny to say. Which is funny to say though, because like when you post it, it stays up forever, right? But people forget about it. People move on, and people don't look at it anymore. So, correcting for the fact that some of this stuff does lead to real work. You know, BAP's posts led to a real book, and which led to a real podcast. Most of this stuff doesn't result in that. So first, like, what value as art does the transient, ephemeral online stuff, some of which is absolutely brilliant, unquestionably brilliant, what value does it have if it doesn't turn into something lasting? Like, how important do you think creating concrete, tangible pieces of art, be it a painting, be it a book that you can hold in your hand, how important is it that it turns into that, number one? Number two, about the gatekeeping. My question is, why would we want to gatekeep these people? Because the good thing that they offer is rigorous standards, which I think is a very positive thing.
Right.
I think it's something that we need. But the negative part is that they might water down the message. They might try to turn it into something either that they can over intellectualize, or they might try to water down the stuff, because no matter, I'm going to say something that I think this crowd will accept, but is in general a controversial statement. I do believe that it's impossible for the academy not to water down right-wing ideas into something acceptable to liberalism. And that's why I think these people need to be gatekept, even though I'm sure they have good intentions and they're good people and they could probably help us do many good things. Do you agree with me that that's the reason why they should be gatekept, that an academic probably shouldn't be trusted because they will probably water down the right-wing ideas that could go into the art, be it about women, be it about LGBTQ, be it about liberalism, politics.
I think like that's one way of approaching it. But I think like in some sense, what you're saying is that, I mean, that in itself is entirely a bit too political. I think that it's not the fact, like, it's not just the ideology of why we should be gatekeeping these people or educating them or whatever. It's more so that, I mean, that's one aspect of it. But I think like there's problems with saying like from the assumption that art should be like, oh, this is a right-wing art, quote unquote. But I think like the meta level of gatekeeping is, and so I see Thomas back, and we will get people talking, but after these questions. So be patient, my friends, and I do want to get Adam in here. The problem, I think, is that we need any movement, like barring politics, barring the political right, barring whatever, Chan culture, the frog Twitter, not the frog Twitter, you know what I mean? It's like, I think like the reason that these people should be met with at least cursory suspicion, not like overt hostility, but I think suspicion is because a lot of professional academia will treat it as a sociological bauble to study, to exploit, to frame in certain ways, and to not really give a full nuanced picture of what's going on the ground, rather to slot it into an academic exploration that itself is subject to the penetrative forces of like study. Like, I know it's like a cliche, but to quote, I've said this before with you, with Astral, in different spaces that we've done. I love the Jeff Goldblum quote from Jurassic Park. No, exploration is a violent, penetrative act. So a lot of academics, they will tend to, and this is what happened to the work of art in the 20th century up into the 21st century with academics, is that they've come into different avant-gardes. They've neutered it, they've sold it, they've written different doctoral theses on them, and they've sort of robbed them through the act of exploration and study. They've robbed these artists of their power, their vril in some ways. And I feel like that's the meta concern apart from the politics. Of course, the politics are going to be perennially misunderstood in terms of like, why is it that negative XP writes about this certain, and again, I have to keep in mind YouTube purposes for people who want to speak, right? Certain things you can't say. Why do you think Negative XP does songs about this mass quote unquote incident and this mass quote unquote, blank? Well, of course, from the outside lens, I mean, that could be treated with a variety of like, sociological lenses. So I think that's the problem, is that when academics, they tend to get into a scene, this is what happened to punk. I mean, come on, let's face it. This is what happened to punk. And, of course, punk was always inherently, in some ways, politicized and made for the academy, right? Like in some ways, at least in the 1990s. But those are my concerns. I think beyond the politics, it's just a matter of what is going to be the particular hermeneutic of suspicion that they're going to treat us with, right? That is, but that being said, I think that there inevitably will be, academic work that could probably slip under the radar that can be a bit more sympathetic. But these are people that are probably, like, I'm thinking like Millerman and Murphy and other people that we know that are probably like on the out and outs with academia, rather than people that are explicitly getting tenure. I don't know how someone like Michael Anton does it, to tell you the truth. Maybe because he's working in like a very specific environment. But yeah, these are as for the gatekeeping, I guess that addresses both questions. I don't know. What was your second question, Astro?
No, the second question was gatekeeping, and I forgot what my first question was because I've been drinking. But it was a good question though. So what do you think? There was a really good tweet by current American citizen who I think is current. I think he's called like future Moldovan citizen now. And he tweeted something like, and actually this was like a direct critique of I Am 1776, where he said that. Yeah, you remember that tweet?
What did he say specifically? I remember I covered it in my live stream.
Oh, did you? Okay, good. Okay, well, what did you say about it? But just for the audience, the tweet was something to the effect of like, we don't want to make explicitly right-wing art. We want to make apolitical art by right-wing people, which I basically agree. Like, I think if we can pander to our audience, but doing so will make it like at best some pop culture, paperback novel adjacent product, and not really high art or literature. Like you can't, in my opinion, I don't think you can make art with the intention of making a political statement. I think you have to make art because you're inspired to make art, and as a right wing person, that inspiration will produce something that will resonate with other people. And my tweet, I was kind of actually intending my tweet yesterday as like somewhat of an addendum to what Future Moldovan Citizen said, in the sense that if we create something like that, instead of preaching to the choir, which has its own merits in its own way, but instead of preaching to the choir, we might lay the groundwork for a developing ego, a nascent future right-wing artist, or a nascent future, just not even a potential artist, just a person who doesn't have it all figured out yet, doesn't really stand on one side or the other, and is going to go out into the world and face all these problems. And the left wants people to just indulge in everything, and they want them to just go for it, and they want them to totally accept the feminized matriarchy that they're entering into, and the terms that society is built around, that were set by women who do not have their best interest in mind. And even when these women do think they have their best interests in mind, they can't. And that's, of course, a huge part of the problem, is they can't have their best interests in mind, but they think that they do. So I said this in my interview with Lomez, that I unfortunately feel that we have an obligation, because I wish we didn't, but I think we have an obligation as like men who are concerned with art and are concerned with ideas, to give something, to put something out there for young men to find, to help them as like a guidepost on their way through the modern American world, which hates them and wants nothing more than to suppress them. So, which reminds me, Gio, I have a question for you based on something me and Lomez talked about, but I'll let you respond to what I just said first.
Yeah. There's always going to be that obligation. I think that it's funny. I was going through Ben Braddock's piece again about Lana Del Rey. It reminds me a lot of my friend Crooner's work on his documentary about the e-girl, and how in some ways, like these categories of what we know as archetype. I mean, even Jung predicted this about how the categories of what we know as archetypal are always subject to change. I mean, this is his work in the 60s, or the early 60s, with the UFO phenomenon. And it's funny how like we could just like look at a pop star in the same way we could look at the great works of mythology, whether it's Artemis or trying to think of a mother, Inanna, Ishtar. I think it's very interesting to look at that lens. But at the same time, I think that, one thing that I would say as a criticism would be that, I mean, throughout the issue, there's there's frogs, there's Giga Chad and so forth. Like, in some ways, it is like a template to look at, especially for young men. But at the same time, I mean, there's an element where you could get lost in meme culture, and then it sort of reverts back to, the bludgeon of the discourse. Like, how many like Giga Chad threads are there? Like the text ones, that the Amarnites like using. Like, how many like of those dialogues, the Giga Chad dialogue, like how many of them are out there, right? Like, I mean, a lot of those are brilliant. Obviously, they're brilliant. But I feel like there's always going to be something lost in translation when you do try to like take what young men are like experiencing now, or what their primary outlets of expressions are, which, I mean, one of the big ones is meme culture, and to translate that into something meaningful. There's always going to be a lot of slippage and a lot of, like, let's call them birthing pains, for lack of a better term. I mean, my own artwork, I mean, doing doing like prints and so forth that are based around memes. I mean, my attempt to try to like, I don't know, immortalize is sort of like a pretentious word, but at least like lift them out of a certain form of impermanence. Because I do feel like things are more.
Yeah, that was the question I forgot. How important is it for you? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, there was this great article by my friend who does this Y2K NFTs. And this article he wrote on his website about how the thesis that, like, you know, the popular cliche that if it's on the internet, it's there forever. Theoretically, yes, but that's actually not true. I mean, a lot of things get lost in translation. A lot of things get wiped over time. A lot of the transition between Web 2.0, or rather Web 1.0 to 2.0, and I guess now there's going to be 3.0. I mean, a lot of data was lost. A lot of like hollowed halls of the digital libraries of Alexandria are gone. And I feel like people, as liberating as that is, well, I mean, for certain people doing certain things, it's terrifying because a lot of this culture is going to be genuinely lost. And that's happened throughout history. Only now we have the ability to like completely wipe out things rather than just the library burning down in one location or one writing of a philosopher getting lost. Now its whole server is filled with the discourse of thousands upon thousands of people that are lost to history, right? And I think that this is why art nowadays is important. And we have to seriously think of this as the act of art making being a form of cartography, a form of recognizing what is impermanent. And even though the attempt to lift something like a meme out of impermanency is ultimately a failure, it's always going to be a failure because the nature of memes change. I feel like in some sense, the archive factor of the work of art nowadays is very important. And as much as like a lot of art world snobs do a lot of like very pretentious like exhibits around this theme of archiving, I think like very sincere, very like neurodivergent people, you know, like Joseph Cornell, who in a way use their artwork as an act of archiving of experience and of ordinary life, and not just of ordinary life, but also of dreams and reflections and so forth. I feel like that's more important now than ever. And we definitely, I feel, are under threat of losing just by nature of the way that information is corralled and controlled. We're under threat of losing a lot of these things into the aether. I mean, if Twitter, you know, or other tech companies want to wipe us off the face of the earth digitally, I mean, this is why I think that, yeah, I'm just repeating myself now. But do you get what I mean, Astral?
Not only do I get what you mean, but it's a perfect setup for the next question I have, and maybe we can take audience comments after this.
Yes, yeah. One more question, then we'll get to people. Yeah.
So I don't want to give too much away, but maybe you're willing to spill the beans completely. But the Passage Prize book.
Yeah.
I had you on my show to talk about the Passage Prize, but we're two East Coast Italians, and we just talked for like 3 hours and never even talked about the Passage Prize once the whole time. Yeah. So we're gonna do that now. On my interview with Lomez, which everyone should check out. It's a phenomenal discussion. That guy is like utterly brilliant. He kept referring to the essay that you wrote for the Passage Prize book.
Oh, Guarded Light? Yeah.
And he didn't want to give...
That came from an ISIS lyric, by the way.
Yeah. Well, he didn't want to really say what you said in that. Like, he didn't want to...
I forget what I said in it, so don't worry about it.
Oh, no. But I'll quickly prompt you, and I think you'll probably remember the gist. Because he was worried that he was going to mischaracterize you, and he also was like, look, you could just buy the book and read it in Gio's own words. But he I don't know if your entire essay is about this, because the initial printing of the book is what, $400?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to wait for the paperback, which I think is coming in September. But he said most or all of your essay is concerned with your justification and reasoning behind choosing King Salmonfish's deep fried meme for the third place. And I guess you got a little bit of pushback on that. And some people like said that it wasn't art, and like, why did you pick that? And I feel like that speaks exactly what you're to what you're talking about to the.
Oh yeah, okay. So first of all, I wrote two things. I wrote the art blurbs for the top 3 winners. And did I write one for Dora too? I think so. So that's what he's referring to. But then I wrote another essay that's just also in there called Garden of Light, which goes into like the creation of the work of art more specifically. But the blurb about King Salmonfish, I think, was my attempt to understand what he's doing, but also to recognize that there is ultimately going to be mistranslations, and there's going to be, in a way, an effort to avoid, I think, exploitation. Because I said, the history of a lot of outsider art is a history of, like, I don't mean to sound like, a typical, like, I mean, I know Adam's dying to say this, but, a typical, like, lived the art world that talks about, oh, well, art brut and, outsider art is, like, embedded in the history of exploitation of the artist. But it is true. I feel like that was one thing to, like, when you inevitably bring someone to a larger platform that exists in the sort of like cauldron of the online, as King Salmonfish does, there's always going to be, like, I feel, an inevitable violence being done to it. But then you have to realize that writing that, I was also talking to him as I do frequently. And, he's perfectly, comfortable with it. He loved it. He loved the fact that it generated so much controversy, and people, like, I even mentioned it in the review, like, people called it, like, the so-called affair of, like, the Passage Prize of the E-Right is, like, the so-called affair of the work of art, which I feel is pretty funny. But, I think, like, my main point is that he's critiquing the particular developments of what people would call, quote unquote, internet right-wing aesthetics up until this point, with, like, heavy layers of, like, of course, like, schizo posting. And I feel like, you can critique the method of editing, but you have to realize that, like, I interviewed not recently, I interviewed a few months ago, but I'm kind of scared to release the episode to the public because of various dramas he's involved in with certain people in a certain group. I interviewed Nuke Telly, and we were talking a lot about the development of the E-Right's aesthetic template. And editing is such a huge part of it, whether it be images or videos. And I feel like King Salmonfish is really the crescendo of that particular drive in what art and aesthetics has become on these, like, online, far right spaces or whatever. Not even like far right, but just like poster spaces that comes from an amalgamation of different forums and Chan culture and so forth. And so, King Salmonfish, he very well, I think, is the best example of replicating this. And, Nuke Telly is one of the few editors that really, like, started it all. And, but of course, I'm very scared to release that episode because of certain America, a certain very popular e-celeb with a very dedicated army of Zoomers, which I'm afraid will mass report me if I release that interview to the public. And it's very unfortunate, but maybe one day when things calm down, I will release it as a special edition. You know who I'm referring to, right, Astral? A certain army of Zoomers.
Yeah, I know who the enemies are, but I don't know this guy you interviewed, I don't think.
Well, Nuke Telly was one of the very first, like, people doing edits, like, that became very popular, like video editing. Like the Hyperborean posting, like, kind of like what our good friend Identic Jesus does. Like, with the spinny wheels and all that, right? Like, he was, like, one of the first, like, him and Biggie Slonk and a few other people and Panther Den to do, like, that type of video art stuff. That was then became, like, very crazy and very abstract and very, like, in a lot of ways purposefully off-putting. And so, like, that is, I think, a huge force in, like, what the E-Right took to be digital art or, like, post-internet art. And, people in the art world do very effective things, like, a very good person. Like, I can think of a few people doing very good video art, but, like, in a fine art context, where when it comes to the internet, when you're dealing with meme culture, you're dealing with, like, post-Chan, Twitter spaces and so forth. like the video edit, the image posting, the meme posting, like memes that take on a life of their own, they become this sort of aesthetic language of these spaces. And I think like me interviewing like him or Wide Dog or King Salmonfish or other people, I feel is worth it, because these are the people that are directly responsible for a lot of like, and yeah, they're just shit posts that are designed to like offend blue checks or whatever a lot of times. But like these become meaningful in some like strange way that you can't even understand. And I feel like I may be just giving like a theory solid justification for like just shit posting, but in some ways, I mean, maybe we have to like inhabit, and this, I think the value of something like I Am 1776 or the Passage Prize is that sometimes you have to allow yourself the space to become more pretentious and to like really value the reflective mode of like, okay, what are these people doing? And it's sort of like, you know, and it would be like, I know people give him a lot of hate and a lot of flack, especially your enemies. But you know how like, what's his name that wrote Hillbilly Elegy? He's running for Congress, I think, JD Vance. I would love to interview him one day. It's sort of like
he's cool, man. I don't know why people give him shit.
I think like the enemy more than anyone gives. Like he's an easy target for them for some reason. But like, you know, when he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, it's sort of like an attempt to portray these people that he grew up with from a sympathetic lens. And I actually watched a documentary that's very similar to Hillbilly Elegy, but this was made in like the 80s, just when the Appalachians were being destroyed, right? By, you know, post-industrialization. And it's, you know, the documentarian said something very similar to JD Vance in that it's not like an exploration, rather it's a portrayal of people that are close to me and people that I grew up with. And so,
wait, hold on, what documentary?
I have to look at this. Was like a TVO special thing that I watched a while ago. I have to look it up, but it's about like these Appalachian mountain people, and it was made in the 80s. It wasn't made by JD Vance, but it was similar to Hillbilly Elegy. And I feel like this is why we need to, in some ways, cultivate the writing side of it is important too, because, you know, there was always this sort of kissing cousin relationship between the art critic and the artist, because the artists in some ways can't be reflective. They have to be in the moment. And so it's up to people that do have the ability, that have like experienced things in these spaces, in the trenches, rather than the academic coming in to violate and penetrate a space vigorously. That is very important. And I feel like the main concern that they did address in that other space, which I feel is valid, is the sort of perception that what we're producing isn't quality enough, or what we're doing isn't worthy enough, or what we're doing is sort of amateurish. And, you know, the meme that like, you know, why is it that a certain faction of like a certain political aisle, why they're so effective at what they do aesthetically and artistically, and even in terms of literature. You know, I think like as the years go on, we have to seriously like look at putting these notions to bed. And like me and Wide Dog, who won the Passage Prize, if you go to my interview with him, and I would love for people to subscribe to Patreon to listen to the full interview with Wide Dog and others, we talk about this, about how to actually build like an effective like quasi-institution, and, you know, to free ourselves of a lot of the mistakes that people make when it comes to like instrumentalizing the work of art. Because, you know, he actually has, he is, without doxing himself, like he is a person that works in the quote unquote industry in like illustration, animation, and graphic design. So his perspective is greatly valuable. So I highly encourage, even if you don't want to pay me, to go to my YouTube channel. That is, I believe it's episode 8 of Content Minded with Wide Dog, and he won the Passage Prize. So yeah,
can you put one of his tweets up in the top so we can follow him?
Yeah, sure.
Now, is King Salmonfish here right now?
I wonder. He usually comes in, but like...
Well, here's the deal, man. I had to block that dude because he's a schizophrenic. He's a maniac. And he's like a really smart dude. And everything he says is like on point, but he just like bugs the fuck out. And like I had to block him because he would just spam my tweets like
all right,
every...
That's his quote, the pinned tweet for Wide Dog. So go and follow him too. Go and follow him. He's a great friend of mine. He's a great dude. And he's a great artist as well, a great digital artist. But yeah, King Salmonfish, he can rub people the wrong way. I know.
I mean, I wish the dude would just chill a little bit so that we could hang out. But I mean, why did you pick like a deep fried meme? You know, because the deep fried. I mean, I hope you didn't address this, and I'm just like being redundant here, but like, dude, a deep fried meme is very of the moment. You know what I mean? It like doesn't have any lasting. Lomez like seemed to totally. I'm not going to speak for him, but if you listen to the interview, it sounds like he totally stood behind your decision. You know,
Well, it was a group
like,
decision. It was a group decision.
well,
So
he said that too, but you were the one though who like you were like the authority. You know,
yeah,
and like I worry that like a deep fried meme is like very of the moment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, true. There were other people, but like one person in particular, we had to disqualify for like just reasons of like he's a close friend of mine, and it would have been conflict of interest, blah blah blah. But like, I think like I see enough in King Salmon Fish's posting that is beyond just the moment to just be like another deep fried meme. I think like that's probably
dude. The guy is really fucking smart. Like I'm not taking that away from him. But he's like
I think like
he's an absolute autist though.
Oh yeah. But my logic is that King Salmon Fish in his artwork serves a purpose of destroying the pretensions of other like aesthetic and artistic endeavors of the online right that came before. So he's like the destroy, and then then Brown's work of art is as a fine artist is like the erase part, and he's very much a very amazing fine artist. And then White Dog is like the improved part. He's like the future. So the past is being cleared away, the present is opened up to fine art, and the future is the totalized aesthetic vision of White Dog. So each of them serve a purpose. And plus, like, just the fact that, I mean, there were like a lot of great illustrators that sent in pieces, but I felt like that it would be doing a disservice to them because you can't really get a full picture of what they're doing in terms of their serial work. So to just pick up one piece out of the group would not be like, a fair shake. There's this one illustrator in particular, the one, what's his name? Starts with a G. He does a series of like the Norsemen. I forget his name, but he's really great. He's a really great artist. But I would much rather people go and buy his series rather than, because when you're taking something out of the wild, something that belongs in more of an illustration context, and you're putting it with, what people consider like a singular work of art, there's always like the problem of mistranslation. And, there's a lot of people I would have considered. I mean, I had a lot of like terrible things that people sent me, but
dude, you keep saying mistranslation. What do you mean exactly by that? Like,
I mean, like when you work in a series, when you do series work, it's very hard to like just pick a few images out of the whole and to like just say that, I would much rather, it's much rather a question of like having the work of art be a self-contained unit rather than a part of something that deserves to be given in its full picture as a series. That's what I meant. Yeah. So does that make sense, or am I just...
No, I mean, maybe it does, but I didn't really get what you meant though.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. So it's always hard to like pick illustration that comes from a series because it's like...
Yeah, but is that what you mean by mistranslation though?
Yeah, because you're never going to get the full context of that particular work of art. And, so...
Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you meant mistranslation because I feel like you use that term in reference to like the PhD people, who are going
yeah. No, I'm maybe a better...
You're using it like differently. I got you.
Maybe a better word would be like miscontextualized. That would be like...
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Now,
so let me add Adam, if you still want to speak. I know Sam Buns wants
people can start going now. Geo, good. This is always good. I feel like I don't know. I'm not going to try to blow smoke up Geo's ass here, but I feel like Geo's kind of an authority on this.
I don't know if I'm an authority. I'm just
but you're somebody who thinks about this a lot.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this today. Like, there's a lot of people here who are really just posting, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of other people here who are really only here for the politics, and that's also fine. And I wonder if talking about like the art right and also trying to figure out like and this is a question for everyone who has the mic and everybody who gets the mic later. So anybody, this is not just for Geo now. In the same way that they get annoyed to call this a movement, or they get annoyed by people who don't sort of conform to like all the standard right-wing ideas or the right-wing ideologies, I also wonder if they get annoyed about talking about art so much. I suspect that they do, but I haven't seen it happen. But my question though, and then Gio, answer. Just let me get the question out real quick. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
My question is, do you guys think it's important to discuss and come to some form of consensus idea of what is the work of art in the digital era, number one, and number two, what sort of art should we be producing and why? Like, is that just pedantic and is it just spinning the wheels, or is this a conversation that needs to happen? Obviously, I think it needs to happen. I think it's very important because I think we are currently, Gio's going to get this reference, I don't know if anybody else will, we are currently a body without organs, and we are re-territorializing the work of art in the digital era, and everybody else is too. And it's important that we step up to the plate, in my opinion, to produce something, or not to produce, but to conceptualize something real and tangible that people can look to and take a hold of and say that, like, this is our thing. This is our thing. Because, our thing right now is just like a bunch of posters on the internet. You know what I'm saying? But like, we need to like make it bigger, in my opinion. People disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But I think we need to make it bigger, and I think we need to, Lady Astor, and I'll shut up now. Lady Astor always says that we need to try to like emulate what the Beats did, where they made like an art movement that totally influenced the wider culture for decades and like an entire generation after them. I fully believe that that's what we need to do. And I really want to hear other people's thoughts on that. So I'm going to mute, and I look forward to listening to feedback.
Yeah. And there's always problems with that. But I mean, the movement thing is kind of, there's many pitfalls of like,
it's a little bit cringe. It's a little bit cringe. It's a little bit cringe. I'm not going to deny that. But so be it.
But yeah. I mean, there's always going to be problems with it. I mean, this is why I say avant-garde rather than movement. But anyways, maybe Sam or Ancient Philosophy. Let me get to Adam as well. So I actually invited Adam, but I guess like, I don't know, these Twitter spaces, they're always janky for some reason. But whoever wants to go first, All right, Ancient Philosophy, and then we'll get Sam, and then we'll get Adam. And
thank you for the space. Very interesting. I'm glad that this conversation is being continued. So this sort of addresses the question about what kind of sensibility we have to have, taking into account the new nature of online art making. And I think there's at least three things that are sort of unique about right-wing artistry. The first is that, and this sort of goes right into Dark Star's point, is that we were going through a period of transition. And so it's not so much that we should have a movement, it's more like we're at the very beginning of the tree beginning to grow. So we don't exactly know what we have yet. We're right at the beginning of this new right-wing movement. And so it will come. And this is one of the reasons, I want to get sidetracked, but this is one of the reasons why diverse voices for gatekeeping is going to be so important. Diverse but quality gatekeepers, so that we don't all have the same voice. The people judging us shouldn't all have the same voice as well. But this point is part of a broader paradigm, which is that I think we are in the midst of a cultural revolution where the left is going to be on the back foot in some way. And it's the right who is going to be avant-garde and is avant-garde. We are going to be pushing the envelope. We are the one innovating. There are so many brilliant people just on right-wing Twitter doing all kinds of amazing things. I mean, I am absolutely shocked at how many brilliant, talented people there are. Everyone has a Substack. Everyone has a podcast. Everyone's writing something or painting something. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So that's the first point. The second point is, I think the way that art is consumed, and this is sort of limited to right-wing Twitter, is that it's contextually appreciated. And what I mean is, it's the context is the onlineness. That is, you would used to go to a museum and see a piece of art hanging on the wall, and you go up to it, and maybe or maybe not, you would read the placard about who the artist was, the date, and the name of the painting, and that's it. Now the way we consume art is, and this isn't for new art, but this is for past art. Someone will make a post, and that is how we experience the art, is by a thread explaining the context of the entire history of that person, or using it as a prop for a thread about, say, the Lord of the Rings or whatever. So there's this contextual aspect of online art that makes it very complex and embedded in a way that I think is makes art what do I want to say? It's entangled so much that it's hard to appreciate quote unquote art just naked by itself. And then the third point, this one might be a little more controversial, but I think because of this social media aspect of it, that, and I think this is especially the case with right-wing Twitter, we're actually interested in artists as much and maybe even more than the actual art. Like we want to know the artists as people, or as some kind of ally or friend or group chat member or whatever. I really think we are attracted to personalities of the artists in a way that really brings a spotlight to their charisma, as opposed to just their art.
Thomas 777 is the best example of that, man.
Yeah. Well, even BAP is a good example of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all I have to say. That's probably too much.
No, man, that was great.
Yeah, that was great.
Great.
Who wants to go next? And then I know other people have requested, so Sam, then Adam.
Yeah. Let's see. I think one of the major differences between like left-wing art, and it's not even just art, it's just all of the political commentary, posting, everything, and right-wing art and posting, is the like nature of the voice. Like all leftist art tends to have the same voice, if you even want to call it like a voice. And that's sort of the point. Like there's this notorious tendency on the left to like reduce people to just the same gray sludge.
Hypermoralization, you could say.
Yeah, it's the moralizing too. It's this like hectoring tone of like a sort of like in Dostoevsky's Demons, it's like just repeating the pamphlet and brochure slogans of your particular form of nihilism. But the strength of like art that's not emanating from the left is that it cultivates personality, cultivates voice by grounding it in the influences of a tradition. And I wonder like if people creating memes online could actually have like if you saw a meme, you'd be like, oh, that's the work of that particular creator. Like it immediately had an artistic stamp to it. You know, I think memes mostly they're like folk art, you know, like we have all these great folk songs that have come down and are like have this like authentic power to them, but we don't remember the names of their creators so much. But maybe out of that you could have like a more defined artistic voice or personality emerge. But one thing that T.S. Eliot said about James Joyce was that he had a trained intellect. He was so thoroughly grounded in Aristotelian and scholastic thought that even though he wasn't a practicing Catholic anymore, it emanated from his work, and you could tell that his personal voice, which was so distinct, had been shaped through this like traditional engagement and training. And I think that that's the thing that both like leftist art and also like the sort of libertarian Ayn Rand art don't really understand. It's like trying to create just through this like disconnected will that is not grounded in like the concrete truths of material reality and of the spirit. It's this just imposition of the chaos of the untrained will and of pure whim. And I think that that's the strength of like right-wing art. Not even explicitly right-wing art. Yeah, I wouldn't even put it that way. But it's the power of the voice, of the distinct, trained personal voice that can emerge.
It seems like there's two extremes going on nowadays. One being there's no longer any movements in the sense that there's either the anonymous like traveling minstrel show of meme culture or like the hyper specific like brand creating a world of posting and a world of identification onto their own. But
this is what I meant about gatekeeping.
Sorry.
Like in academics and stuff. Like I feel like, and I don't actually like to go in quite as hard on them as other people in this sphere do, but I do think that what we have here is really raw and it's really it's unshaped and unformulated yet, and I think we need to let it be like that for a while. And that's the problem. That's all I'm trying to say. Like, I feel like that's the problem with academics and academia, is that they try to like hone it and whittle it and sharpen the edges into something distinct and something that they can like look at from all angles and dissect and pick apart and analyze and reduce and become, quote unquote experts on. And I feel like that totally just takes this raw energy and really captures it and negates it. And that's what I'm worried about, even though maybe no one is personally doing anything, malicious. I actually think that a lot of academics have the right intentions, but they don't have the creativity, and their minds have been too boxed in, they've been too hemmed in. And I worry that they don't really have the ability to break out of that. And sadly, a lot of that has to do with like their careers. If they go outside the box, they're no longer welcome in the institutions.
Well, same with people in the professional art world too. I mean, that's the neglected part. I mean,
a lot of them are academics. A lot of them.
Yeah, most of them nowadays actually that, or affiliated with academia. Like that's the academicization of both literature and art has been like a disaster in a lot of ways. But Sam, you could speak to this actually as a writer, so then we'll get other people. Go ahead, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that what you're saying, Darkstar, about the way academia treats art, it's a lot like this idea of Kierkegaard's, where he says like there are ages of passion and ages of reflection, and the the academic is totally in the realm of reflection with no passion. It's like, Kierkegaard uses the example of someone throwing a gold doubloon out on a icy pond or icy river. And in an age of passion, he says, people are like, who's going to go out there and get the doubloon? But in an age of reflection, it's like anyone who goes out there to get the doubloon is going to get criticized by all the people standing out on the shore who are like, oh, the ice is like definitely thin now, and this is a bad idea. Like it feels.
Oh, this is great, man. This is Kierkegaard?
Yeah,
Which phase do you think we're in right now?
Age of reflection to like a terminal extent.
Yeah, but I think perhaps the other age is on the horizon, though.
Oh yeah,
Okay, cool.
Signs of it.
Hopefully, I mean that's always the hope. But sorry, did I cut you off, Sam?
No.
No, yeah. I'm very curious to hear what Adam has to say, and also So we'll see. You want to go, my friend?
Oh, what's up, Wiggers? What's up, Gio?
Yo.
Sorry, I chimed in earlier because you were just talking about Harmony Korine. So before I go forward, I will say, even though I think he's probably a bit too mercurial to be classified as right wing, I do know personally that he was a Trump voter. So make of that what you will.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I thought he would hate.
No. He says that. He's open about that. He admitted that.
I mean, he barely talks politics, but
Whoa.
And
he's actually
Trump.
pretty. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, he was probably supporting Trump for probably similar reasons that I first became interested in him, and that he like represented to him probably like a more authentic, almost liberalism in a lot of ways. In terms of like fun, opening up the debate like that, provocation. But I do think he's one of the good guys. Just putting that out there.
Man, I have a totally different read on him because I wrote this one like an aside about, I think it was either Gummo or was it Kids, where I said like, maybe it's more like Larry Clark, like in the sense of like these like hating like middle America as a bunch of these like inbred bumpkins and like wanting to spit on them.
Harmony,
Yeah, bro.
Harmony, the most radical thing about Harmony is that for him the avant-garde isn't New York, it's wherever you come from. It's like that's the thing that makes you interesting, like that backwoods town. That's the avant-garde in your personage.
So he understands the motivations of people that voted for Trump in these places more than like some lib writing a paper.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah. He's a Nashville boy,
Listen, man. Listen to what he says about the movie Kids, like interviews about that and the making of the movie. He really, I don't want to say resented, but he doesn't want his name to be attached to certain elements of that film that the New York art scene like put in there. Larry, what's his name?
Larry Clark.
Yeah, like he kind of like those dudes, like those kids that were in the movie, and Korine himself are kind of like, yeah, we kind of realized that he's just a lecherous.
Yeah, it's just classic Coomer art, man.
Yeah, and like I don't think they got that.
I like Larry's photography, I do, and I think
but bro, he's like.
Film.
What's that?
And I think Bully's a fantastic movie.
Bully is an amazing film because I love Nick Stahl, like his work in Carnival.
Yeah. So I never actually watched that movie. It's supposed to be. I've never heard a bad thing about it though.
I mean, it's not as faithful to the real story, but it is a pretty good film.
Yeah, just seeing him do true crime was a good vibe,
Yeah.
But what do you go by? Safety?
No, I just call me Adam. Safety's just a project.
All right, so Adam, like I wasn't like, did you hear what I said about Harmony Korine, like why I brought him into the conversation?
Yeah, I caught like a little bit of it towards the
end. Like I wasn't trying to like claim, like I wasn't trying to say he was right wing and his art is not right wing. No, I don't think you think that. No. I don't think you were. My question is, do you think I was onto something? Like I felt like his aesthetic and his approach to making art is something that should be emulated. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
Well, this is what I was going to say earlier, or no, before I got into Harmony Korine. My 2 cents on this is I do think as this thing gets bigger, there is going to be some pitfalls or some growing pains, I should say. For one thing, art shouldn't need to announce itself as art for dissidents. So when you're doing that, you're immediately like sort of branding it in a what I was gonna say is like, you know, as these things evolve forward, there's definitely going to be some branding strategies, some astroturfing, and then next thing you end up in like an algorithmic block that totally cuts you off, not just from like a desired audience, but for the full means of your expression. I mean, I put out a book last year. I've written 100 essays. I have a book coming out this year and at the beginning of next year. None of those I wrote with the intention of spreading a certain political concept. I want to be, you know, I want to express myself. And sure, most of my beliefs are not going to be tolerated, at least in this iteration of the institutions. But as soon as we cut ourselves off from the possibility of that broader audience, then we're actually castrating art of its potential. See, when I think of someone, I mean, you know, let's talk about a milieu that I am, Geo, as you know, particularly interested in. You know, my favorite literary milieu are reactionary modernist avant-gardists, Balzac, Celine, Pierre Drio La Rochelle, Lovecraft, Welbeck, whatever. Now, yeah, certainly those guys are right-leaning, but are they right-wing artists? Could they conceivably just be slotted into the NPCC festival? I don't think so, because when you're bearing the soul, when you're actually making an artistic expression, it should be mercurial enough that it's very hard for someone to just grasp in a certain algorithmic block. And I think one thing going forward, anybody who wants to contribute to this thing should be thinking less about how this, and certainly, like, I don't mean to sound like a salty bitch, because I do think that because I'm like, because my views are contradictory at times, I do think that maybe I've taken financial hits in this regard. So I don't want to sound like a little salty, but at the same time, I think it's healthy-minded when you're putting yourself out there creatively to only be thinking about yourself, what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and not necessarily how this fits into some media publications, branding strategy.
100%. And Ancient, you have something to say?
Yeah, I disagree. So here is one of the things that I think this nascent movement of the emerging right is going to have to face. And every time we talk about art, we talk about this, and the issue comes up over and over again. And it seems like the consensus is that you cannot explicitly mix politics with art. And that if you do so, you either ruin the art, or you're ham-fisted, or you're cringe. And it's almost as if you're doing the political equivalent of the theological counterpart, where someone makes God's not dead. And that's an embarrassment, of course, to anyone that takes theology seriously. And so because of this ham-fisted element, we have to make our work non-political or apolitical. Well, I want to say 2 things about this. The first is, I think the right has battered wife syndrome. And what I mean by that is, for years, we have been so desperate to have any content that minimally reflects what we believe, or how we behave, or the way we live our lives, that we'll take any bone that's thrown to us, even if it's just a chip off of a wishbone, off some small chicken, not even steroid fed. We are so desperate. I remember this study years ago when Stephen Colbert was actually funny on his previous show, and how they showed that people on the right and the left would equally find humor in him. It's just that they would read his intent in different ways. And I think this is a reflection of this battered wife syndrome that we have, that we're so desperate to cling on to anything that instead of actually embracing something that's right wing, we will just attach ourselves to something that is less left wing. And so the reason this is important is because it shows that instead of being straightforward with our beliefs, we are hesitant and tentative to express our political beliefs at all in our art. And the second point is, so I've written stories, okay? And listen to these kind of concerns I have to have when it comes to having a mainstream audience, and tell me if they're political or not. And if they are political, then you have to agree with me and say, okay, I guess you're right, Ancient. You do have to be political when you're making art. Okay, when I make a hero, I have to worry about if he's a straight male, because if he's a straight male, he could offend mainstream sensibilities and left-stream sensibilities. That's a political concern. I have to decide whether I'm going to put tradition and past in there and show them as something other than benighted and ignorant. I have to decide the same thing for a family. I have to decide whether I'm going to put quote unquote gendered language in the story so that it's accessible to those with the egalitarian mindset. I have to be careful that I don't put a damsel in distress in my story of the hero, because women aren't allowed to be damsels in distress because they have to be strong Mary Sues. I have to worry about the social life of the characters, because even if it's not something that I myself would advocate, if I put a character hitting on another woman, then that might imply that I'm advocating people in real life hit on women when they get drunk. And that's unacceptable. All of these are political questions. All of these are things that the artist must consciously put into his art. So I say we have to be conscious about how we politically organize our art. And it's not that because it's political, it makes good art, or that if you have good art, it becomes political. Rather, you must have an eye to both. Make good art and make it good politically.
See,
Okay,
I didn't
these
say
are
apolitical, though. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, man. You can respond.
Oh, yeah, I didn't say apolitical, and certainly, I mean, I don't know who's read my stuff here, but I'm not. I've never held back in anything that I think, in anything I've put out there. So this is less about the expressing of what you think politically than I do see a certain tendency arising within certain media spaces in which it starts to sound less like the authentic expression of one person and more like the neutered expression of a certain block of or apparatus. It's very apparatchik sounding. And do you know what I mean? Like 20 people all publishing around the same areas, all sort of putting out the same 1,000-word essays and takes. Like if you really want to say something raw, then you just got to say it. And that's honestly more political. You know, the question about strategizing is interesting, but I think you're ultimately doing something more radical by just saying exactly what's on your mind without
I can't
self-censorship.
I can't agree with that more. I cannot possibly agree with that more. I think that that's the only thing we can do. And I don't think, like Ancient, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but
Yeah, wait, I don't see how that
Go
goes
ahead.
against
You can
what I'm
respond.
saying. Well, just to clarify, I don't see how that is in contradiction. I don't see how that negates what I said.
Well, you made it sound like, if I can jump in, you made it sound like the artist or the author is thinking about all these things, whereas I view it, that's what the left and the opposition is doing. They have to fill certain boxes. They're not giving any new ideas. Everything's derivative or recycled. Always a Mary Sue story, always, some white oppressor, things of that nature. Whereas people in this sphere can just tell a good story, can just tell whatever it is.
But
and that's
you're
how
absolutely
I view
right.
it. And it's original and it's authentic. And it also
I think we have to also avoid the pitfalls of real lowest common denominator, whatever the Daily Wire is doing, funding some Matt Walsh documentary, Ancient, you mentioned God's Not Dead. I think that's the perennial example of just doing the work, the propaganda work, and comes off as cringe. But I know Bag, you've been waiting patiently, and so then Prodigal, of course.
Well, hold on. Let me throw something out there real quick because
okay.
I think Ancient makes. Well, while I find myself 1,000% agreeing with Adam, I do think Ancient makes a good point. But I wonder if Ancient's missing one key factor here. The art right is predicated wholly upon self-publication and independent publishers that are a result of the internet, that don't exist without the internet. So I think he's bringing up very important, critical issues that we have to face and that we have to deal with, and problems that will kill art if they aren't overcome. But I think the internet as a resource, and this is why Moldbug has written about the art right, and this is what he says. The internet gets us around that. The internet is the reason we can have an artistic movement now. It's the independent publishing and independent presses of this 50s, 60s, and 70s that were publishing Bukowski and publishing the Beats. So Adam, I agree with Adam completely. I agree with Prodigal, and I think Ancient brings up some good points, but I just don't see how those concerns will in any way hinder us when we can just apply to Passage Press, we can submit our work to Terra House, or we can just self-publish on the internet or on a blog or on a WordPress.
But this isn't a practical concern. This isn't about whether we can publish. My point is that psychologically, you have to make the conscious decision, despite the fact that the mainstream is not going to like that I'm going to write this woman as a damsel in distress, as opposed to a Mary Sue. Despite that, I'm going to make the conscious choice to still do it. So, and that is the political choice. That's my point. That is a political choice, and it's going to be perceived as political in an era where if you don't use someone's pronouns, for instance, the proper pronouns, you're already viewed as right-leaning.
Listen, man, that is a phenomenally good point, and I don't know if you were here when I tried to say that what we're doing is really, really important. That's exactly what I was talking about. We need to create, and I hate this term, but we need to open up a space. I'm cringing internally just saying that, but it's true. We need to lay out.
Open up the pit.
We need to lay out a space for people to come in and to feel comfortable expressing those things. That's why what we're doing is vitally important.
Can I say something?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, the discussion is very broad, and I think there are problems with dealing with such a broad topic. And to me, a way of simplifying the discussion is to bring it down from the political to the institutional, meaning I think the distinction that really clarifies things for me is between academic and non-academic. And the space you're talking about is already there in negative, meaning it's the non-academic space. The academic space, which is definitely left-leaning and has all the problems that you're discussing, is always by definition on the back foot because it's at least one generation behind because it's top-down. people that decide who's worthy are the older people, are the teachers. The young people write for the teachers. I'm in academia, so that's my experience. And also, it's different from different art forms. So I'm in music, so for me, it's not a problem of writing content in a way that it's manifestly right-wing or left-wing. But to be an academic means that you have to write in certain styles that are approved by the barons of academia. So I think once you're out of that sick sort of mechanism, then everything is open. But one thing that it's not been explored enough, I think, in my experience, and that's what I'm trying to do, is the medium, the digital medium itself, which is neither visual nor just oral. For a musician, you have to kind of explore both. So you have to be able to master the tools, which takes years of exploration, of practice, of just patience, of knowing what's what and how it evolves, and then try to explore the medium itself. And I think that's something that we can do. We can fill in the gap that academia is completely ignoring because it's still stuck in the avant-garde of the 60s as far as music is concerned. And just go from there. The space is already there. Yeah, we need to coordinate for sure, but we don't need to create something from scratch because we want something that it's free and where there are no barons, there are no, it's just, people are just voting from wherever they are. That's all I have to say.
I think the best thing you can do for your writing is to just give up any hope of getting published in the New Yorker. I think that it's like a lot of people are haunted by the specter of David Remnick, the editor of the New Yorker or whatever, judging their
yeah,
bro.
And if
you're killing me, bro. You're killing me right now.
and if you can exercise him and that means not writing purely in reaction to the New Yorker or in resentment of the New Yorker, but liberating yourself from that specter. I think it's a boon.
If I could just jump in quick, I'm going to head out. But I mean, I think the difference here is that I understand what Ancient's saying, but I think that's more, you're seeing that out of social media influencers and stuff like the Daily Wire, where they're clearly profiting and using algorithms and clickbait. They're going to be thinking about those things when they put out their content. But if it's people from, I guess, the alt-right or the art-right who basically are putting this out for passion and love, and they're bleeding for their craft, and they know that they most likely won't be accepted by the mainstream left or the mainstream right. So at the end, it's going to be something original and something people don't see. And at that point, whatever's raw and real and gains popularity, that will equal, appeal. But I mean, you have to look at art. I mean, most authors, most artists don't see success in their lifetime or much later on. So this is something where, we have the counterculture. We know, you look at all rap music, it's all the same. You look at all, every literary novel coming out of, Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster, it's all the same woke LGBTQ rainbow shit. I think that this is something where it's so novel and so new and so raw, if it is going to be done, that, you have to not view these institutions that have failed, art and culture and care anything what they have to say. This is just basically your voice. And if people want to, pay for it or sign on, then that's the end goal of itself. I mean, that's, in my opinion, some of the most successful artists and authors did. They didn't do it assuming they'd get mass appeal. They bled. They were homeless. They bled for their craft. And then, on that note, that's what I think is something what neither side has, whether it's the, the traditional right wing or the left wing, what they are now. They're just both, reactionary blobs against each other. Whereas in this sphere, you're seeing new, authentic, and raw stuff that neither side would either think of or care to publish.
Yeah, that was great.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. So somebody's got their hand up, man. They're Muscant?
Yeah, Philip Daniel, my good friend.
Oh, go. Sorry.
Hi. I wanted to continue the line of thought that was offered by Gallo on the sort of the ossified and the nature of academic classical music or academic art music currently. Now, fortunately, I am an outsider to this scene. I'm largely self-taught, but it is true that the Western art music scene or classical music scene, as it is incorrectly called, is stuck in this sort of endless loop of the of the 60s and 70s avant-garde, as he said, this kind of overly theoretical framework that rehashes these post-tonal techniques from post-serialism through spectralism, while not in any way trying to engage with having an actual audience beyond the ivory tower. And I think, though, one should recognize that initially the avant-garde in the earlier part of the 20th century was not an exclusively left-wing project in Western art music. I've said this before, but the core members of the Second Viennese School who pioneered atonality and serialism, particularly Arnold Schoenberg and Anton von Webern, were politically on the right. Igor Stravinsky was politically on the right. In France, Claude Debussy was likely quite right-wing in his politics. And even later, during this period of the 60s at Darmstadt School, you had Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who was enough on the right that some of his former pupils putatively canceled him. So as far as Western music is concerned, it's true that the legacy of the 20th century avant-garde nowadays, which has become totally hardened, ossified in the academy, and has no real public appeal. It's true that this has been appropriated by the political left wing, and of course you can see here on this platform plenty of pronoun listers working in this medium and controlling the online discourse or dominating the online discourse of this medium. But in a sense, this is part of our patrimony, our artistic patrimony, just as poetic modernism of the sort of T.S. Eliot or E. Cummings was as much a product of right-wingers as it was of those of other political affiliations. I think that although this style has, as I said, become totally hardened in the academy and lacks popular appeal, there's certain techniques that can be, of course, not arbitrarily, but can be combined with more traditional, more accessible techniques and musical language to affect an experience for the listener that yields benefits. And of course, if we think of art politically, and I'd rather not treat art in too political a fashion, particularly music, but if we want to build up this right of center artistic counterculture, I think it would behoove us to make use, those of us working in art music and Western art music, to make use of these modernist techniques while also, of course, remaining while remaining loyal to the centuries, to the centuries legacy that we have predating the 20th century. So we can still compose music as accessible as Rachmaninoff, let's say, while making use of techniques, I think, in some fashion that we'd associate more with a figure like Pierre Boulez, who is not easy listening and who lacks popular appeal, unlike Rachmaninoff. I think that might be, for some of us working in this sphere, it might be a promising avenue to explore. I know it's working for me to some degree, at least I hope. I know there was a rambling. I know I went on and on with that. It was a little disorganized, but just some thoughts on that topic.
Do you think there's any future for classical music, though? I mean,
I think there is. I think.
New
creations now. I think what we see. What I've noticed on YouTube is that there's an uptick in interest among the younger generation, and it's interesting because this uptick, a lot of it is a greater interest in more obscure figures who have a more whose musical personality and musical language is more idiosyncratic. So we're not talking about Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf here. We're talking, from the 18th century. We're not talking about the stereotypical cliche. We're talking. I'm talking about figures like Karl Amadeus Hartmann in the 20th century, or Maurice Emmanuel or Eric Satie at the end of the 19th. So more idiosyncratic voices, and helps that there's this genre video on YouTube, the score video, the scrolling score video, where you can read the score as you listen to the piece, and engaging visually that way. It seems to be working in terms of increasing interest in this. I think there's also increasingly exhaustion with the limitations of much of the popular music that's in the culture industry, in the consumerist culture industry, that is incessantly promoted. That there is this deadening, repetitive, paper-thin simplicity. I think that some people, particularly, on the right end of the bell curve, to be sure, are just tiring of. But
even like in classical music, I know people are upset with the normie will always love the film scores of Hans Zimmer, but
or Bernhard Herrmann, or
Max
Steiner.
Yeah, I know Eric Satie. I mean, he's now universally loved among the art hose. So,
I think ContraPoints is a fan actually of his, which is not too surprising.
But I want
Satie was weird, but
I want to move on to other speakers, but I gotta ask, I've not to black pill. I'm really not trying to black pill, but I've thought about this a lot. The digital medium, we have to contend with what the digital medium does for all art forms, and I really worry that it kills music. I can see how the digital medium can make a new a breath of fresh air into literature and into visual arts and video, but it just seems to me it just kills music.
Possibly, but we can also explore new tone colors, timbres. We can explore the overtone series, as many academics do, but I think we can do it in a more in a more interesting way. But there are all sorts of aspects of music that we can explore now that we live in this electronic / digital age.
I think one of the problems is that we were used to go see concerts, and the experience of being in a concert is very particular, both because you are in an audience, but also because you experience sound as it comes out of an acoustic instrument is a very different experience. Once you put music on a computer, everything changes. And I think Darkstar is right in being concerned that that is as a detrimental effect on music. And I don't know what the solution is, but I think trying to bring some embodied component to the music by adding some visuals is one of the ways of exploring the medium. I think we cannot just keep going and we cannot keep talking about classical music. We shouldn't be calling it that anymore. I mean, you're using instruments that are old, but we can call it something else. We don't have to call it classical music. We have to contend with the idea that financing an orchestra is just a financially losing endeavor. And as far as sad as that makes me, is not something that will keep going. It's just too expensive. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think we have to face the facts that once we start experiencing music from a computer, we have to change the way we make music in a way.
I agree. I agree. I agree 1,000%. Couldn't possibly agree more.
Yeah, I mean, given the nature of like popular like band music, it's like that's even changing in terms of touring. Like they're almost going back to an older model of like jazz musicians will stay in a town for like a month or so, like a traveling minstrel, instead of like the tour, like the big like tour headline. Like that's almost unfeasible for a lot of bands now. So yeah.
I don't have much to add to what the former speaker said, except that the problem I see, the reason I say that about music is that you don't have to be a musician to make digital music. It's just sounds. And you actually, Gio, me and you talked about this when you were on my show.
I think you do. Like once you start making music, whatever tools you use them, like you have to have a sense of music. You have to have a sense of form.
No, go ahead.
You have to exercise your inner ear, and that makes you a musician by default.
Not really though. It doesn't mean
because you're playing.
It doesn't mean you can play an instrument though.
You're playing with pitch.
But to be a musician, you have to have a musical skill. You have to be able to play an instrument. And
or at the very least, you have to have a knowledge of the fundamentals of musical composition.
Yeah, but anyone can learn that though. Anyone can learn that.
Yes.
You don't have to be. You don't have to be skilled at an instrument to learn those things. You can learn all of that, but without the digital medium, it back in the day, like it wouldn't get you anywhere because you couldn't actually play an instrument unless you wanted to become a conductor.
True, but there were composers like Hector Berlioz in the 19th century and Alban Berg in the early 20th who were not virtuosos. They weren't virtuosos at any particularly musical instrument. They might have been able to play one or two at a semi-proficient level, but they were virtuosos of composition. And the complexity of Berg's scores in particular, is just really incredible. But there's not much of a difference between the music of Berlioz, who was not a virtuoso, and Franz Liszt, who was, in terms of pitch content, in terms of form.
Composition, it's its own instrument. It's like playing an instrument. You play in your head more than you play it in real life, but it requires practice, it requires technique and all that. And you don't have to go to a conservatory or you might have some initial teacher. That's important, yes. But then you can develop it on your own. Most music, I think, is self-taught. So,
well, I'm not trying to be a hater, so I hope you're right. But I'm the least optimistic about music in the digital age. But I'm not trying to if people can do it, if somebody's doing it, man, I encourage them wholeheartedly.
Yeah, who didn't speak, Astral?
Well, there's a couple people that Dark Meckelson, who is my boy, AF. I don't know if he still wants to go. Oh, good. And Ethelwolf, I was hoping he would have requested the mic, and he did. We're running low on time. Lomez is in here. He's welcome on the mic if he wants it. I think he would have requested.
Yeah, and please, because this is going to go on YouTube, no fad posting, no naughty words of the gamer variety. So,
but Lomez, I think you missed it. We were talking about you earlier. Maybe you heard a buzzing in your ear. So if you want the mic, we got a few minutes left. We're going to close the space soon. But I want to hear AF. I want to hear Aether Wolf. This guy whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. I'm giving you the mic though. Whoops! I just made you co-host actually by accident. But you can talk. All right, so go ahead. Ash, what's up? AF, are you there, bro? You're next if you're out.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you for your patience, man. You've been waiting a long time, so I appreciate that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was driving anyway. And there was, I think a long time back, you might have forgotten, but someone did make a point about the Beatles sort of creating a movement of art, in a sense. That, that strongly resounded with me, simply because they did sort of pick up a very strong sort of spirit of this, what can only be described as the sort of secularized, sort of rational critique of culture, and that has sort of carried on over to modernity and what we know as modern art. It's all based on the same sort of principle. You have to criticize the culture with this sort of very ironic sense of rebelliousness, and that's the only sort of element that remains in the so-called art, and which is probably why it has sort of birthed this sort of a generation of critics, right, who've actually made a huge career out of just criticizing. They've never really created anything, but their entire career is simply to critique art, critique movies, critique music, and which is also why there's such an imbalance of creators and the critics. In the olden times, in the Renaissance period, you used to have the aristocracy that used to look at art, promote it or criticize it, and they were quite good at it. So they had a very good taste, and they had a very good sense of what the atmosphere was and how it would resound with people. But nowadays it's more about who can have the most sort of spiciest critique. You just have a huge array of essentially Nick Francis who are waiting for someone to create something new, try something, be creative, and so they can pounce on them. So I definitely understand this sort of the fear or the hesitance of artists, especially right-wing artists, to pop up and try something new. Another thing that I believe that puts right-wing art in such a pitiable position is because all of the strongest proponents of it have done the same thing that academia has done to art. They sort of formulated it, but in right-wing circles in particular, you would see people sort of emphasizing on the most superficial aspects of the Renaissance art, which is nudity, and they would try to be more provocative and more explicit with that as possible. And that's really the only critique that I've received from these types of people. Oh, her pussy isn't popping out enough, and I don't like that. So I think that's also something that plagues the oncoming sort of right-wing art. I have a solution to this, which I think everybody already knows this, but it's just not bothered to go through with it, because artist. I'm an artist. I'm learning classical singing, and I'm quite sensitive. So I can definitely completely understand why artists would be so hesitant to put forward, their work, especially in the right wing space, is because you require a very attuned sense of sensitivity, and when you're in that state, you're not really ready to sort of put up with all this critique that's offered to you, all this sort of almost demeaning comments that made towards your art. So, but my only advice to you is really just ignore it. If you want to create something, create it like a mad person. And I think in madness, I think you can't perhaps create something good, because in my experience, that's when I have created the best pieces and performed my best. So it is quite kind of sad, because there's no sort of uniting spirit that could promulgate you to be more creative and create something new. But if you carry yourself with the same spirit as Sam Hyde does, but in this sense, you want to create something, more vibrant than, the derivatives of this stuff is, actually, if you think about this is probably why AI and DALI in particular scares these people. It's because their art is so derivative of older art that they can't possibly think about creating anything new. I think DALI would probably put an end to that dilemma and force you to create something that will resound with the hearts of people, rather than this sort of theoretical form that it has taken. So I think so far that's all I really have to say. I don't know if that made any sense.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree. I think like the problem is too, the criticism is always. It happens on all sides, but it seems that like the right is very adverse to like. And so a certain portion of the right wing is very adverse to like anything new being created, but also like the age of the critic, in some ways, the classical critic is gone, but nowadays we're left with like the endless replication of easy content that is cheap. Like, how many breadtuber video essayists are there? Film critique video essayists that talk about the problematic aspects of X, Y, and Z. It's like very derivative. Like, some people do it very well, but like there's others that just make my skin crawl. But anyways, Ethel Wolf, you had your hand up, so please have the floor, my friend. And again, just a reminder, no Fed posting. So yeah.
Hey, yeah, really happy to see a space like this, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. I love seeing the fast space as well. I was here for that as well. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because I really do think that art specifically is the most influential space to create change, beyond politics. So this is why I'm so happy to see this. And I wanted to kind of touch upon what you've been talking about today in the past space. Whether to be explicitly kind of right wing or whether to be subtle about it and just to create the art. I think we could use both, honestly. I think we can use both, and I think we just need more. We need to be infiltrating and proliferating in every scene, whether that's also in academia, whether that's in small spaces, big spaces. I think we just need to promote specifically right-wing art and art that, may not be so explicitly right-wing, but we need to promote it and have other people listen to it and look at it and hear it and read it. And I think that's the way to get on the right track, So just to be active and to produce, and to also bring up other people who produce, to be seen as the most important thing that can create the most change, and I love the idea of this movement kind of rising up, and it does take me back to thinking about, the beat culture, the counterculture that at that point was, and I think this is such a great opportunity and space for, us to do the same. And I kind of want to mention some things in passing. I think a lot about Newt Hampson specifically. I think he doesn't get enough mentions, as a guy who was very much heavily reactionary and just an excellent author, and a guy who's had so much influence, on everyone we talk about, whether it's Miller, Hemingway, any of the psychological authors that kind of came in the modern space, who I don't necessarily care for that much, but still just an incredible influence. Thomas Mann, I mean, you name it. This guy basically was talking about the psychological aspects of the novel before Freud even came up with it. So I think that's an important guy for us to check out. Another thing I want to mention is also, about classical music. I think that there's a huge audience for it. And luckily, Asia right now is kind of keeping alive the idea of orchestral music and composition. And there's also really good people out there making stuff. I think just off the top of the head, Chad Lawson, you have in Korea, Yurima. So you have artists who are definitely making great original music. And, that's not even mentioning all the movie scores and the interest in, as you were saying, I think Dark Star, Hans Zimmer and all that stuff. I think it just needs to find an audience. And I think, it comes to a point where parents are starting to send their kids, to actually learn how to play the piano, how to play the violin, right? I don't think there's ever going to be necessarily a shortage of that. It's just not quite so influential at the moment. But with that said, guys, thanks so much for letting me speak, and I love what you're doing here. So keep it up.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, so I'm glad you said it. So I'll say what I was holding back. Newt Hampson and Celine, for example, if you read them, their work is implicitly right-wing. It's implicitly conservative, but it's not explicitly so. I mean, I've only read Growth of the Soil and Journey to the End of the Night by those two guys, but there are conservative or traditional or right-wing ideals or ideas or perspectives in those books, or there's a right-wing critique, but those are not explicitly right-wing books in the sense that they're not preachy at all, and people keep mentioning the beats, and I really think they, I hate to beat a dead horse with them, but the reality is that while say Ginsberg had explicitly had it in mind, what they were doing and what they wanted to do and the effect that they wanted to have on culture. A lot of the other guys didn't. A lot of the other guys were just living their life a certain way, and they wrote about it, and then that influenced culture. Now, I don't necessarily agree with their lifestyles, especially William S. Burroughs, at all.
Ginsberg was...
Yeah, I don't agree with their lifestyles, with their lifestyles at all, but they were highly influential. And they were not highly influential by being explicitly political at all. They were highly influential by depicting a certain type of lifestyle, and that resonated with the culture. Well, that they kind of planted the seed, and then that lifestyle ascended, and now we're seeing the sick, dysfunctional fruit that tree bore. So we need to do the same thing, but in a reactionary way, in my opinion. So I don't know.
That's exactly what I meant, Dark Star. That's exactly what I meant about the beats. I actually don't have any type of appreciation for the art form at all, but you got to hand it to the way that they were able to move the culture along. And what I want to do that is for the reactionary side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have to assume that there's something latent in the culture, something reactionary latent in the culture that we can tease out and bring to the surface if we keep making this art. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, Gio, I think I asked you, and I think you gave me an answer, but I don't remember what the answer is. The first person I've ever heard talk about the art right was Moldbug, but I don't know if he coined the term or if he's the first person to start talking about it. but whoever it was certainly onto something.
Oh yeah. I don't know the first. I mean, there are people that have talked about it. I mean, even before 2016. But I mean, he's certainly the first, I guess, to put a name to it, a label to it. Yeah. So, but these have been great points so far. So I wonder who hasn't spoken yet. Astral. I don't know.
Well, I'm about ready to close the space, but I will keep it open if people here have like closing comments. Looks like Michael is requesting to speak, so I'll give him the mic.
Oh yeah, Kronkix, you haven't spoken yet, so yeah, go ahead, my friend.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, bro. Yeah, go ahead.
So earlier, like I guess you were like bringing up how like Harmony Korine like possibly like voted for Trump, but then I'm like thinking, I'm immediately thinking like how like Vincent Gallo, he's like much more like superior as a filmmaker, and as like, you know, he's like explicit, you know, like and then he's like functioning in that world. And like I watch a lot of I watch like a lot of like contemporary films, so I'm like really in that world, and like he's the only right-wing individual I can think of, and he's like actually like impacted other artists like Albert Serra, who's like a really forward-thinking filmmaker. But like it's, so I don't exactly see like, because I don't think Harmony Korine is like that strong of a filmmaker. Like he didn't really, like the only impact I've seen him have is like Josh Safdie, but you know, even he like kind of misunderstands Harmony Korine as like a New York filmmaker, you know, and again, it isn't explicit like it is with like Gallo.
These are great comments, man. I'm glad you brought up Gallo. I kind of forgot about him. The problem with Gallo, though, is that he's like, he didn't really produce that much, and I think he's sort of blacklisted himself. But I think he also wasn't. I don't think he had the drive within himself. I don't think he had what it took to really be a prolific filmmaker. But he's also a very disagreeable person, so I'm sure he probably could have done more if he was more agreeable, and I don't blame him for being disagreeable, and he is inspirational, but and he's a great example, by the way, really maybe the best example that we've had tonight of someone who makes apolitical art, but who is himself right wing. I'm like, not. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Like he like he's like really into Bresson, you know, like similarly Harmony Korine is too, but then it's like Korine is like more into like posturing, like okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like his work is like strong enough that it should be like something we're like looking to like, you know, emulate, and you know like it's, you know, like yeah, I guess it's just like as simple as that, like because it's like whenever he like talks about Bresson, it's like in a very obscure way, like he'll talk about A Gentle Woman or Angels of Sin, who like nobody talks about those movies like by Bresson. They usually, you know, are like bringing up like you know, Korine, he just brings up the devil probably because he just wishes he was like Fassbender, and you know, like he's just like looking to posture. You know what I mean?
One thing.
Wait, who are you saying is posturing, Korine?
Yeah, I mean, I like his work, but you know, like he can like even if whenever you watch like Mr. Lonely, like whenever he was like making Julian Donkey Boy, he was like a crack.
Yeah,
you know, like
that's really
he was, like,
what
very addicted to crack. He was like,
yeah,
he was like playing. He was LARPing.
That's when I didn't like him. That's when I was like, F this guy. But I think he was. I mean, I already said what I think. I think he was just doing a big F you. I think Vincent Gallo and Harmony Korine both like stymied their own career and deep sixed it by making such abrasive art, and Vincent Gallo did so by just being an abrasive person. But I think
like tiff with Roger Ebert didn't help him whatsoever. Like,
yeah, but they became friends in the end, right? They like cursed him with cancer, but then Roger Ebert said he had bad aim. But they became like really good friends after that. And, but Korine, he's like still he's still like making the beach bum because he's still like living in that like fantasy that he's like a like an avant-garde art, which he's not.
Because
like
he's
that
old
was like,
now. Harmony Korine has jumped the shark.
Yeah, that was like Gallo's criticism of Harmony Korine, that it's like he's just like he's like calculated. Like it's like very like he like that's what kind of turned me off from like with like Gummo, like, you know, like it's very deliberate and it's very very calculated. He's just trying to create this persona for himself.
I totally agree with you, man. And the whole reason I brought up Korine the other day is because Ben Braddock brought up that movie Florida, I forgot what it's called now.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And,
Florida Project.
And it made me think of Gummo, but I agree with you. Like the Florida Project's like much more authentic, and Gummo, although Gummo's good. I like Gummo, and at the time, Gummo was like really necessary. I could go on about that movie a lot.
Well, what's the one more recent one with McConaughey?
The beach bum. Like, he's just posturing. Like he's calling him like Moondog to like get in with like the art hose or whatever.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I didn't even watch that one because I was like over it. But
yeah,
should I watch that?
Take on it that it was like a scathing critique of the boomers as a whole, but like I don't know if that's unintentional or not. So like
one other thing I wanted to say is Stan Brakhage. He said something once that like every like artist, no matter whether they vote right or left, are ultimately conservative because they're trying to establish a tradition. And that's like that kind of blew my mind whenever he said that.
There's very few artists that actively try to eschew the creation of a legacy or tradition after themselves. I mean, there's a few crazy people. I'm sure that like there's a lot of avant-garde figures who probably hate that aspect of it, but they're ultimately not able to control that. But so maybe really quickly, Sam, if you want to say something, then Alexander,
sure.
You had your hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah. One thing that I think all those guys have in common, Gallo, Korine, actually the Beats, and was it Sean Baker? Was that the Florida Project guy? Is that they all are in touch with the power of the margin. You know, they're interested in like the old weird America that Mark Twain was into. And like the left, I think in the past would make movies that dealt with those parts of America, with like Arkansas, Missouri, and not in a way that was just like, oh, these places are like, these evil, horrible places. But now it's like the left only wants to make TV shows and movies that are about like the chicks from like Broad City, like people in, living in the big city trying to have like sexual conquest and stuff. It's all sort of like in the like middle of the like establishment, like the centralizing order, whereas
like Girls, Euphoria, yeah,
I kind of like Girls, but like a lot of that stuff, it's just like depicting a very like homogenous like quote unquote cosmopolitan, but not really, because everyone's kind of the same version of like America today, whereas like Korine and Kerouac are trying to like go out there into like the quote unquote marginal parts of America and get in touch with this like weirdness, this like this like fire of life that's kind of
I'm glad you said that, man, because he did it in Kids and he did it with Gummo, and one other movie I want to just like throw out there, but we don't have to discuss it because I want to get to Alexander, who's been waiting a long time. But that movie, it's like called like The Wonderful World of the Whites or something like that. It's about because Gio mentioned like a 1980s documentary about Appalachia, and it made me think of I think it's called The Wonderful World of the Whites, and Hank Williams III did the soundtrack. Hank Williams III is an absolute beast, and he's in the movie. He's like interviewed about these people. And it's this total, it's a documentary about, people who live in a trailer park in the mountains of West Virginia. And it's a documentary, so it's not exactly the same thing as what we're talking about. But anyway, if anybody's heard of that movie.
One last thing, just really quickly, is that there is like nowadays being made by like I watch a bunch of them for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, some people consider them boring, but there's a bunch of like Canadian American like indie films that depict like semi-rural places, very like quiet character piece type of like movies that don't necessarily go anywhere, but like they're very interesting to watch. I mean, even though there's sort of like people on the edge, there's like a bunch of like Canadian indie films like this in particular, but I don't know if like that in itself could be exploitation. But I mean, yeah. So I guess Alexander, you're last, and then we have to. I mean, Astral, you're pressed for time.
I mean, well, my phone's gonna die, so we gotta end with Alexander. Thank you for your patience, buddy.
One thing about music is that music has always been kind of visual, and it's kind of new that it isn't really visual, like where you're just kind of in your house, just alone. And so if you're kind of making music, you have to keep that in mind, which might be a crutch, and also might kind of give room for creativity, right? But I would say is that like if you are a right-wing person making music, keep in mind that maybe this music won't be just for a guy on his laptop at home. Like think that maybe this actually could fit in a venue where it'll be kind of into sort of, I don't know, underground club or something. And that will kind of give way more room for creativity and then visual expression. So that's one thing. And also with regards to like the creative writing, a lot of it is just like you letting people access a certain part of them that they didn't know about, right? It's usually art, and but also to live with, right? And what the left did really well was that they've kind of introduced ideas that you could live with. And so the job of a right-wing person isn't necessarily to kind of make everyone more right-wing, just to kind of live with something. And those things could be right-wing, but you don't have to make everyone right-wing at the end of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we should. I was saying in some tweets, this is only like marginally addresses what you're talking about, but it's related. I was making some tweets that like only an inspired genius can really like set out to make a piece of art that's going to change the world. Like those people are few and far between. What we need to do is just make art for art's sake, and then something's going to stick. And it looks to me like the phase we're in right now is we're just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall to see what sticks. And you know, there's going to be a lot of bad art produced that way, but it's okay. I mean, you have to get through the bad art to get to the good stuff. So I don't want to end the space, but I went over about an hour more than I intended to, and my phone is on about 2%. I am going to be up a few more minutes, so if anybody has any closing remarks, I'll give you about 30 seconds, and if you don't speak up, I'm going to close the space. This was great, though, man.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, I'm like really happy with what we came up with.
And it will be on YouTube later, maybe in a week or a few weeks from now. So if you missed it, don't worry about it. It'll be on Astral's Substack. So,
Gio, thanks, man. You are a top-notch dude, and I don't know. You think you what's that?
It's cheap and easy content. So
yeah, but do you think that there's more to talk about? You think we can talk about this more? I mean, at this point, me and you have talked about this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's really. I think we're approaching like getting at technical issues of it, but so rather than a lot of interesting stuff, and like a lot of interesting people have come. Not that we're at the end of it, but like I said, it'll be on my YouTube. It'll be on Astral Substack. Blah. See, after a few hours, my tongue gets weak. So
true. Yeah.
And other than that, yes, Content Minded this week podcast on my YouTube channel and on patreon.com/Genre Productions. It's going to be Nina Power, my mega 3-hour interview with Nina Power. So
yeah, I was like trying to like get like look into her work, but like I couldn't. I don't know. What is her deal? Like, what does she say? What is she about?
She's an amazing writer, former academic. Her recent, like we talked a lot about her recent book, What Men Want, but also like her other like more academic type of stuff. It gets into like a lot of weird conversations, which is very nice. You know, I mean, she's a great person, and it's very interesting. We talk about very, broad variety of stuff from her book to incels to all sorts of very interesting things. So that's to look forward to. So yeah. And what do you have up, Astral? You released the Amanda Millis episode, or what's the recent one?
Oh my God! So if anybody's still paying attention, I didn't shill, man. I gotta remember to shill. Yeah, I have a bunch of awesome stuff on deck. I have an episode with my friend, our mutual friend, Edenic Jesus, where we talk about the Friday the 13th and the Night of Living. Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, by way of Eric Newman's The Origins and History of Consciousness. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
I have an episode with him too, but we talk more about his like mythopoetic take on America.
I can't wait for you to release it, bro. That dude is like, he's up and comer, man. That guy's gonna be like big someday, I think. I really do. Because he's got a lot of original ideas, you know what I mean? Like, not many people out there have really original ideas, but that guy's is, and he also has a passion for it. You know what I mean? I want you to release that. I want to hear it so bad, dude.
Yeah.
Check out astralflight.substack.com. Right now, behind a paywall, I have a lot of good stuff. Daryl Cooper, Lomez is on there. His is free. Texas Chainsaw Massacre with two of my friends who are banned now, but one of them is Remus. You know Remus.
Oh,
Gio.
He's a good friend of mine. But other than that, shilling, patreon.com/China Productions. Of course, like the first half of all my podcasts are free. This has been a great space, and this will be up on YouTube, like I said, and it'll be on Astro Substack. So if you missed it, if you just there's a lot of interesting people that just poured in that I wanted to talk to, but maybe and also have a mega 4-hour podcast with Josh Neal, who is in the chat. And that's going to come out in like maybe this month or next month. I have a huge backlog. And but this has been great for people who have been, here the whole time. Astral's phone is going to die soon. So
yeah, we'll sign out, man. If there's interest, we will do this again. I don't know if we've exhausted the topic or not, but we'll see. All right. Peace out.